Shocking revelation, why Paul claimed to be a slave at 3 a.m., you 1T believe the truth. It was 3 a.m., the kind of hour where shadows stretch and whisper secrets. That's when Paul stood alone in his dimly lit kitchen, heart pounding, eyes wide. He looked different, haunted. Something was stirring deep within him, something alarming, something raw. I'm a slave, he muttered, breathless with urgency. What did he mean? Who was he enslaved to? This wasn't a drama, this was a horrifying revelation that sent chills down the spine. Paul wasn't one to throw around words like that. He had always held a steady job, owned his home, and cared deeply for his community. But tonight, as the clock seemed to tick louder in the eerie silence, he felt something shift. The weight of chains, real or imagined, had wrapped around his chest. Memories, dark and swirling, rushed in like a tempest. Was he trapped by his choices? Or was it something deeper, something sinister? The kitchen appliances hummed, a steady reminder he was indeed awake, not trapped in a nightmare. Around him, the air crackled with tension. Lights flickered, almost as if the universe was joining him in this moment of dread. A neighbor scuttled by the window, unaware of Paul's turmoil, yet shattered his isolation. The world outside continued spinning, and the weight of it all bore down on him more. A knot formed in his throat, fear clawed at his insides. Was anyone else awake right now, feeling the same suffocating dread? The clock chimed, and Paul's breath hitched. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Suddenly, everything felt too dark and too quiet. Paul's fingers trembled against the cold countertop, picturing the moment he first felt the weight of this impending doom. Was it a choice made long ago, or was it slowly seeping into his life like a poisonous gas? The clock struck again, echoing eerily within the walls of his mind. It was as if each chime was a taunt, reminding him of something so hidden but itching to come out. His heart raced as he sensed that the truth was more twisted than he dared to admit, but one thing was crystal clear: Paul was on the brink of a revelation too terrifying to grasp. The question hung in the air like unspoken fear: what was really holding him captive? The clock's hands ticked on, louder now. Each chime echoed like the cries of a ghost that haunted Paul, desperate for release. He staggered back, bumping into the fridge, the cold metal grounding him for a fleeting moment. Was it fear or shame that clutched him so tightly? He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to shut out the memories, trying to claw their way back. That it wasn't just a bad dream. No, this was a convoluted mess wrapped in deceit and denial. Paul took a deep breath, but the air felt thick, suffocating. Opening his eyes, he glanced around the kitchen once more, searching for answers hidden among the countertops and cabinets. They seemed to close in on him, pressing against his shoulders. Each shadow twisted into a sinister shape, taunting him. Think, Paul, think. He whispered to himself, willing his racing heart to calm. Hadn't there been whispers of intimacy, of trust turned sour, festering ties that ensnared him? It dawned on him like the first light of dawn breaking through the night. His bondage ran deeper than his physical reality. These were emotional chains, forged in the fires of compromise, fear of leaving behind what he had known. He was shackled not to a person but to his past choices, to the fear of stepping outside the small box he had built. Suddenly, flickers of memory struck. Lisa, his girlfriend, ripping away the last semblance of joy she once brought to him. Hadn't she turned into a captor over time? The constant doubts, the relentless guilt. The nagging voice in his mind that pressured him to conform, to please. He felt that familiar hollow ache in his chest. Just then, the lights flickered violently again, painting his kitchen in brief flashes of light and shadow. Panic surged. No longer could he ignore it. The truth was crashing like waves in his mind. He was not just a slave to one person but to an entire pattern of emotions, a web spun from fear, obligation, and societal norms. He stumbled toward the window, desperation pulling him. Outside, the street echoed with distant laughter, oblivious to his torment. People living their lives, chaining themselves to what seemed like happiness. As he peered into the street, a figure caught his eye, a woman, hunched and cloaked in darkness, her silhouette blending into the night. She was watching him, her gaze unwavering, a knowing look in her eyes that sent a shiver down his spine. "Paul," she whispered, her voice haunting yet familiar. Was it a reflection of his own torment? Or something more? He blinked, and she was gone, leaving behind an imprint of uncertainty. What did she know? Why did her presence feel like an echo of his own scream for help? Out of breath, Paul spun back to face his kitchen. He could feel the walls closing in as his heart raced. The revelations swirling inside him felt too big, too overwhelming to contain. So much was unearthing, but he was left with one burning question: could he break free from these chains, or was he forever lost in this labyrinth of his own making? One thing was rising under the surface like hot lava: he needed to confront his tormentor. But how would he face what he had become? How would he shatter the glass that enclosed him? The answer felt just out of reach, tantalizingly close yet infuriatingly elusive. As the clock struck once more, the room erupted in darkness, a chilling reminder. Time was ticking, and Paul was running out of it. Was it time to face the truth, or would he remain a slave to his silence? The air crackled with an energy that felt alive, wrapping around Paul like a suffocating shroud. He forced himself to breathe, each inhale sharp and jagged, as if slicing through the layers of confusion that clouded his mind. Shadows danced menacingly, whispering secrets he wasn't ready to hear. Yet he could feel the darkness pressing against him, demanding to be confronted. Another flicker of light, and once more, he thought of her, Lisa. Behind every bitter memory lay a constant reminder of what he had surrendered. His breath hitched. The very mention of her name in his thoughts pulled at the chains surrounding his heart. He had sacrificed his authenticity at her altar of expectations. Was it too late to reclaim what was his? With a sudden rush of adrenaline, Paul grabbed his jacket hanging by the door. The chill of night seeped into his bones as he stepped outside, the world looking stark and surreal. The streetlights flickered overhead, illuminating the path ahead but casting long, ghastly shadows that threatened to reach for him. He moved toward the street corner, drawn by an unseen force. The laughter from earlier still floated in the air, and he felt the piercing echo of his loneliness. A fleeting bitterness clawed at him. How could everyone be so blissfully unaware when he was caught in this cyclone of despair? The woman, the fleeting specter of the night, filled his mind. Who was she? What had she seen? He had to know the truth. Paul turned sharply, determined to track down any trace of her, the silhouette that seemed to know so much more than he did. The light from the street glimmered against something metallic on the ground, catching his eye. He knelt, reaching down to pick up a small key. Its cool surface felt oddly familiar in his hand. He flipped it over, wondering what door it might unlock. A tingle of recognition surged through him. He couldn't shake the feeling that this key was somehow linked to his confinement, either in the world around him or, more disquietingly, within himself. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of movement. A figure darted into an alley just ahead, their identity obscured by the shadows. The pulse in his throat quickened. Fueled by impulse, Paul raced after them, heart pounding in rhythm with his rapid footsteps. "Wait!" he shouted, voice lost to the night. The figure didn't stop, weaving deeper into darkness. Somewhere inside, he felt a thrill of fear mixed with excitement. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment he'd been waiting for, the push that might finally lead him to freedom. He rounded the corner just in time to see the shadow slip into a small doorway. Without thinking, Paul shot forward. The door creaked open, an invitation or a trap. He hesitated for only a heartbeat before stepping inside. The air inside was stale, thick with an unseen weight. Dim light illuminated figures around him, all eyes turning to meet his. "Paul, you've come," whispered a voice from the back, smooth and chilling. "We've been waiting for you." His stomach dropped. What did they know? What had he stumbled into? The atmosphere pulsed with anticipation, tension humming like a live wire. He had crossed a threshold into the unknown, and he couldn't turn back now. What awaited him in the dark could either bind him further or finally set him free. But would he find answers or face something far worse than the chains he'd worn in silence? Paul's eyes darted around the dimly lit room, taking in the shadowy figures clustered together, their faces obscured in half-light. Whispers slithered through the air, a mix of fear and urgency palpable in the tension that enveloped him. They looked like lost souls, and for a brief moment, he felt a rush of kinship. "Who are you?" His voice came out sharper than he intended, cutting through the thick silence like a knife point. One of the figures stepped forward, a woman with hauntingly familiar eyes. "You can call me Mara," she said, her voice smooth yet edged with something darker. "We need to explain the truth. You need to understand why you were brought here." With every word, Paul felt a cold dread coil around his chest. "Brought here? I don't understand." The key burned in his pocket, a constant reminder that something was hanging in the balance. Searching for answers, he glanced around the room, noting the half-familiar faces, each looking at him with a knowing anticipation. Mara gestured for him to approach. Behind her, a flickering candle illuminated a table laden with objects and symbols he couldn't quite comprehend. His instincts screamed at him to run, but curiosity, stronger than the pulse of fear, inched him closer. "Did you ever feel it?" Her voice dropped to a whisper, a conspiratorial tone that sent shivers along his spine. "The feeling of being bound? Trapped? Paul, you are not the only one burdened by chains." His mind raced back to fleeting moments with Lisa. The pressure to conform, to please, the slow suffocation of losing himself. It felt as though she had kept him locked away in a cage of expectations. "You think I'm a victim?" Paul shot back, anger flaring unexpectedly. Mara smiled softly, almost pityingly. "You are more than a victim, you are a pawn in a game where you have yet to see the full board." She waved a hand toward the other figures who whispered among themselves, eyes glinting with either fear or resolve. "What game?" He pressed, feeling the weight of their stares, like they were dissecting his very soul. An ancient struggle between those who wish to keep secrets buried and those who dare to uncover the truth. Mara moved closer, eyes piercing through the shadow. "They're watching us. If you've entered this realm, it means you found the key. You can unlock something far greater or plunge everyone into deeper darkness." Confused, Paul stepped back, the shadows suddenly feeling like a cage closing in. "You're not making any sense. Who are they?" A low murmur filled the room, rising as if stirred by an unseen force. "The unknown ones. They thrive in the silence of our fears and linger where shadows converge," Mara said, her breath quickening. "And they know what you did." Paul's heart raced. What had he done? The memories assaulted him like specters returning for revenge. He couldn't shake the feeling that he held more than just a key. He possessed a dark secret intertwined with his past, a secret perhaps even he had buried. "What do you mean?" he asked, each word slipping past his lips easier than the last. "What do they want from me?" "That is for you to discover," she replied, her gaze unwavering. In that very moment, a piercing shriek echoed from somewhere deep within the darkness, causing every soul in the room to freeze. The fragments of whispered conversations abruptly died, and panic welled like boiling water beneath a lid. The light flickered and dimmed, revealing a doorway they had all overlooked, a gaping abyss into another world, the silhouettes moving closer as shadows twisted toward what lay beyond. The whispers returned, ominous and thrumming with anticipation. Paul felt an urgent pulse in his veins, the call of the unknown beckoning him to step forward. Would he step into that darkness and confront whatever demons lay in wait, or would he remain shackled by a past he barely understood? As he stood at the precipice, the figures around him shifted, their expressions a mix of fear and desperation. Just then, Mara reached out and grabbed his wrist. "You must choose. This is just the beginning." With a heart racing from Indecision, Paul stood there, teetering between the veil of shadows and the chance for freedom. What lay behind the door would tether him further or set him free, but which path would lead him to the truth? The air hung thick with uncertainty, leaving Paul questioning if he had the courage to take the leap. Would he uncover the depths of the secrets that had swallowed his life, or would he remain a pawn forever? The moment was hanging by a thread, ready to snap into action. Paul hesitated, the icy dread pooling in his stomach. The doorway loomed larger, an invitation laced with dread, calling to something deep within him. He could just feel that weight in the air thickening, pressing on his chest like a vice. They were all looking at him, waiting. "Make your choice," Mara urged, her grip firm. The urgency in her voice twisted through the oppressive atmosphere, tugging at him. "What if I choose wrong?" he asked, panic rising, clenching his fists. "Then you will remain a prisoner of your own fears," she whispered, her eyes dark and stormy, like a sea before a tempest. Before he could respond, the room trembled as another shriek pierced through the air. Paul flinched as shadows seemed to writhe in response to the sound, the flickering candlelight casting distorted images on the walls. The figures shifted closer to him, as if drawn to the impending darkness, urging him forward. "I can't do this," he muttered, retreating another step. Mara's grip tightened on his wrist, her voice low and fierce. "You can, Paul. You have no idea the power you possess." Her gaze bore into him with an intensity that pierced through his crumbling resolve. The whispers grew louder, morphing into a chaotic symphony, each voice mixed with confusion and fear. Paul felt their collective desperation. These people had come to terms with their darkness. Why was he still so afraid? "Do you want to break free?" He heard a voice from the shadows say, soft yet firm. He turned, meeting the eyes of another figure, this one marginally clearer than the rest. "Yes," Paul whispered. "But what if I don't know how?" "You must confront the truth," the figure replied, their voice compelling, every word wrapping around him like a snake. "You hold the key, not just to the door but to your own shackles." Paul swallowed hard, thoughts racing. What does he even know about the truth? About the so-called chains that bind him? Questions rattled around in his mind, pushing against the confines he had built over the years. Suddenly, the shadows pulsed as if they had a life of their own. A distortion formed at the doorway, morphing into something tangible. Dark tendrils extended outward, looming, beckoning. "Step into the abyss, Paul," Mara urged, her expression a blend of terror and determination. "There lies the power to transform, to finally break the cycle." With every beat of his heart, he stood at the edge of everything he feared and everything he longed for. He could close his eyes, go back to the safety of ignorance, or he could dare to step forward and risk everything. "Remember your guilt," a voice hissed from the shadows. The last traces of his comfort shattered like glass around him. The stench of his own failures crept into his nostrils, dragging forth memories he'd rather leave buried. "Shut up!" he snapped, surprising himself at the outburst. "I don't need to remember." "You can't escape it," the voices cooed back, their tones sickeningly sweet, echoing cruelly in his ears. "It is a part of you. You need to face it." The door's darkness was yawning wide, the shadows beckoning him forward. Paul's heart thundered, resonating with the terror of the unknown. Did he dare confront whatever wretched truth lay on the other side? Did he dare to remember? "Whatever happens, I can't go back," he murmured, almost as a mantra to himself as he started to inch closer. Mara's voice cut through the fear like lightning. "But this is the only way forward. Be brave, let the truth set you free or bind you tighter." With a deep breath, Paul felt the heat of the key in his pocket flaring back to life, encouraging him like a friend. He steeled himself, whispering a silent prayer. Was he ready for the revelation that awaited him within the abyss? With a final glance back at the anxious faces surrounding him, he stepped forward, crossing the threshold, but the instant his foot crossed into the void, the fabric of reality trembled, and everything spiraled into chaos. Shadows lunged, enveloping him in a suffocating embrace. A scream erupted from his lips, swallowed by the consuming darkness, and then all went silent. What lay in the depths of that enigmatic recess? Was it a truth he could accept, or would it shatter him entirely? As the silence stretched, a voice whispered from the void, "Welcome home, Paul." The darkness tightened its grip, ready to reveal its secrets. But would he be able to handle the horrors lurking within? Would the truth set him free or bury him deeper? Everything around Paul shifted, twisted. The oppressive darkness enveloped him, its weight all-consuming. The shadows weren't just shapes, they were alive, breathing, coiling like serpents hungry for scraps of his sanity. He fought against the pressure pressing down, desperately aware of his heartbeat resonating like a drum in the suffocating silence. "Welcome home, Paul." The voice lingered, thick with malice and familiarity. But before he could respond, the shadows began to unravel, pulling back like a curtain revealing a stage, one that was hauntingly familiar. He stumbled into a scene he hoped was long buried. The atmosphere felt heavy, drenched in memories he couldn't escape. There lay the childhood room he'd thought he'd left behind, walls adorned with the remnants of a troubled past, scraps of old drawings and photographs that now seemed mocking. Each picture was delicate but jagged, a reminder of everything he had tried to forget. His heart stuttered as he turned, facing the smallest door in the corner of the room, barely an inch wider than a shoebox. Just behind it, he felt a pulse, a dark energy thrumming that pulled at him like a magnet. It was a door he had never opened, never dared to explore. Memories flooded back, painting vivid images of childhood fears, the unrelenting whispers, the cold clutches of night terrors. "Do you see it?" The voice was now softer, coaxing. "The truth lies in there, waiting for you." He stepped closer, almost against his will, compelled by an insatiable curiosity entwined with dread. He paused, a lump forming in his throat, the memory looming heavy like a thundercloud before a storm. I don't want to remember," he said, his voice shaking, echoing back like a desperate plea. "What if I can't handle it?" "Handling it is the point," the voice murmured, smooth as silk but with an edge. "Denying it only binds you tighter. You've carried it for too long." Silence enveloped him again, broken only by the muted sound of his own breaths. The walls of the room seemed to recede, leaving him standing in the doorway. What could lie beyond that threshold? Could it be the truth that had haunted him for years? Before he could hesitate further, a figure emerged from the shadows. She looked almost ethereal, an image of sorrow with eyes filled with understanding, his younger self, soaking in fear that overflowed like a shattered dam. "Help me, Paul," the vision whispered, voice drowning in sorrow. "Help you?" he asked, disbelief mingling with urgency. The desperation etched into her features twisted a knot in his gut. "How can I help you when I can barely help myself?" "You must remember," she urged, body trembling with unexpressed anguish. "You have to see what really happened." The shadows began to shift again, swirling, drawing him forward toward the door. He could feel a pull from deep within, as if pieces of himself were reaching out, grasping for something lost. Yet terror held him firm. What awaited him on the other side of that door? "Don't be afraid," his younger self urged, voice cracking. "It's the only path to freedom." With each heartbeat echoing in his ears, Paul found resolve slipping back in. He steeled himself, recalling the weight of the key dangling in his pocket, pulsing in rhythm with his heart. It was a key to more than just a door. It was an opportunity for release, opening paths to the past he feared and longed to confront. He took a deep breath, locking eyes with the reflection of his younger self. They shared a fleeting moment of understanding, a shared fear. The darkness around him curled in anticipation, holding its breath, awaiting his decision. "All right," Paul said with shaky determination. "I'll face it." He reached for the door. But just as he grasped the handle, the walls of the room began to shatter, crumbling around him like shards of glass, each piece a whisper of his past. A hot rush of wind screamed through the collapsed structure, pulling him into a spiraling vortex as chaos erupted around him once more. Images flashed before his eyes: loss, betrayal, secrets laid bare like raw skin. Each vision was sharper than the last, cutting at him, clawing at his soul, and then he drowned in darkness again. But in that moment of despair, one question pushed against the chaos, striking like lightning through his mind. What truth did he dare unearth, and at what cost? Would he lift the veil, finally remember? Or would he remain stuck in this endless nightmare of ignorance? As the darkness stirred once more, he felt a specter of doubt linger. Was the truth even worth it? Or would uncovering it destroy him utterly? The grip of the shadows tightened like a vice, and Paul was left teetering on the brink of understanding, caught in a whirlwind of uncertainty. What awaited him beyond the veils of memory, he could only guess. But one thing was clear: the wheels of fate were turning, and revelations were destined to collide. Light shattered through the darkness, piercing the chaos like a beacon. Paul felt the haze beginning to lift, giving way to moments clinging to him, fierce and relentless. The images of his past twisted and turned, battling for dominance. He barely had time to grasp the thin thread of reality before they engulfed him again. Barely breathing, he was thrown into a swirl of half-formed memories, faces, voices, fragments like broken toys scattered across a forgotten landscape. He recognized laughter tinged with pain, shouts that echoed in the darkness, and a soft lullaby that sang to him from a faraway place. Each memory came with a pulse, a sharp electric thrill that left him nauseated, gasping for clarity. "Look deeper," that whisper curled through the din, more insistent now. "You are closer than ever." Paul struggled to make sense of his surroundings as he felt himself spiraling through a narrow tunnel formed of shimmering shadows and flickering lights. Each twist of the corridor felt alive, wrapping around him, playing against his skin like smoke. The more he fought against it, the more it drew him in. "Remember," his younger self's voice sang hauntingly, rising above the cacophony. Then he was in the hallway again, the familiar stretch of dimly lit walls pressing in on him. Pausing for a moment, he looked around, soaking in the atmosphere that threatened to choke him. But within that suffocation, something began to spark. A series of long-buried fragments broke free, crashing over him like waves. 3 a.m. he muttered, his mind racing through timelines, moments of nighttime terror from childhood creeping back. He remembered waking up shivering, trapped beneath blankets that felt too heavy, the outline of a figure looming in the doorway, dark as midnight. The dread held him captive. Shadows that whispered secrets while promising safety. There was something sacred about the night, but it was twisted and riddled with pain. His heartbeat surged, and with it came clarity. That time, those hours before dawn, had held the power of revelation. But there was always fear in those moments, an understanding that a dark truth lay near. Why did I claim to be a slave? The question swept over him, raw and pulsating, suddenly feeling urgent. Was it a cry for help? Or a desperate grasp at understanding buried deep? Again, the door appeared before him, maddeningly small but omnipotent. Paul felt the pull again, hotter this time, as if the key in his pocket was burning through the fabric of his reality. He wasn't sure anymore what he feared more, the shadows or the daunting possibility of what lay beyond. "Don't let it consume you," his younger self implored. The truth felt like a boulder, heavy and insurmountable. What if the truth was worse than the shadows? What if it tied him to things he couldn't escape? Visions of a life painted in guilt and shame pushed against the edges of his memory, but what could the truth reveal? Secrets buried by time and pain? Or perhaps, stories of innocence forsaken? He fought against the swell of panic as he gripped the key tighter. It felt alive, throbbing with every pulse of his heartbeat, a promise of release balanced precariously on the precipice of dread. Paul forced himself forward, recalling what was at stake, his younger self trapped in the dark, begging for help. This wasn't just about him anymore. He couldn't betray that plea. Then suddenly, a thundering crash shook him back into reality. The walls of the hallway swayed as a deep rumble echoed through the space. The shadows laughing, mocking his hesitance. What if he was wrong? What if the door held nothing but more darkness? With a fierce determination ignited within, he approached the door again. Was he finally ready to confront the childhood memories that festered in his mind like an open wound? As he reached for the handle, a low growl rolled through the air, and the door shook violently. What would he find if he dared to open it? The shadows curled tighter around him, whispering promises, tempting him back into ignorance. Paul hesitated, alone with a decision. That could change everything. Was the truth worth the darkness that threatened to drown him whole? He gripped the handle, heart racing, and took one final, shuddering breath. This time, he wouldn't turn back, but just before he opened it, an icy voice rose behind him from the shadows, chilling his blood. Are you sure you want to know? The question lingered in the air, heavy with implications. What awaited him on the other side? Would understanding guard him against the darkness, or would it plunge him deeper into despair? Trembling, Paul stood at the edge of a truth that could reshape him or destroy him forever. Paul's breath caught, the icy voice wrapped around him like a vice, squeezing out any remnants of resolve. The shadows thickened, swirling with palpable dread, as if they were alive, taunting him. He turned slowly, finding nothing but impenetrable darkness behind him, an endless void that seemed to swallow sound, light, and sanity. Show yourself, he shouted, his voice trembling yet defiant, echoing against the corridor's walls. He needed to confront whatever had been stalking him through the ethereal maze of his mind. A figure began to materialize, shifting like smoke. It was tall and cloaked, features obscured. Paul could only make out gleaming eyes that shimmered with an otherworldly silver. The entity felt familiar, and that sensation sent a jolt of fear through his soul. You're the guardian of your truth, Paul, it whispered, every syllable dripping with mockery. Do you really want to open that door? Are you ready to face the chains you've forged yourself? He clenched his fists, desperation flipping over and over in his gut. I was a kid. I didn't decide. The heat of rage began to seep into his voice, the shadows swirling around him as if feeding off his turmoil. Yet you claim to be a slave, the figure pressed, its voice sharp and chilling, slicing through his anger. What were you really running from? Memories surged, memories he'd long buried. The child he had been, a boy tangled in fear, loss, and an unshakable sense of helplessness. Each recollection cracked through the surface now, clattering like marbles spilling from a jar. Paul's heart quickened, and his resolve slipped momentarily. What if he was right? What if confronting the door meant confronting the guilt of his past? What if the truth would dig up old horrors he'd rather leave buried? Do not let your fear twist your truth, the figure commanded. You must decide, Paul. Is it liberation you're after, or are you content with the chains? He was sick of chains. Sick of being haunted by secrets. The truth felt tantalizing, a double-edged sword. It could set him free, but what if it brought his worst nightmares crashing down? You don't understand, he snapped back, pleading with an invisible form. You don't know what I've been through. Oh, but I do, the entity hissed with twisted glee. The shadows around him flickered, as if in agreement. I know more than you could ever bear. The unseen weight of 1,000 sorrows pressed down on him, and he felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. What did it mean to confront the shadows inside? Would he find forgiveness or despair waiting for him on the other side? Yet another hesitant breath escaped his lips, each one shared with the lingering uncertainty of his decision. He had sought escape for far too long, comforted by the numbness that came with ignorance. But was it time to face the truth? With shaky resolve, he pressed his forehead against the door, feeling the heat of the key burning against his palm. Let us find out then, he murmured, almost to himself. Before he could steel himself for what lay beyond, the figure interjected, be sure, Paul. Once you step through, there's no turning back. The past will unravel and expose the rawest scars. Are you ready for that? Had he ever been ready? Just then, a loud thump reverberated through the hall, drowning out the shadows whispering around him. The sound felt like a heartbeat of its own, steady and pulsing with urgency. In that moment of chaos, everything shifted. The door flew open, sending a gale of anguish swirling around him like he had cracked open a dam. Memories poured out, writhing like shadows breaking free from chains. Paul steeled himself for the storm as brilliant light pierced through, illuminating the dark fragments of his life. Everything he once thought was buried now spilled forth in a blinding flash. But a voice boomed from within the brightness, a voice he knew too well. "You can't run from me, Paul." And then, amidst the clashes of memories, a familiar set of eyes met his. Paul stumbled back, breath hitching in his throat. This was the moment of truth. One he had tried to escape. But now, it was here, and the shadows were ruthlessly unshackled. What awaited him in this fury of revelation? What horror was he about to face, anchored by the weight of his own past? The air crackled with anticipation, an electric reminder that the worst secrets often lead to the greatest revelations. Paul stood poised before the storm, heart racing, ready to confront the ghosts he had feared for too long. What would he discover about himself on the other side of this threshold? As the light burst open around him, he knew the answer would change everything. "Are you ready to know?" The voice echoed again, this time filled with a promise of revelation. The air grew heavier as Paul stepped into the light, the voices around him swelling to an almost deafening roar. He shielded his eyes, struggling to focus amidst the kaleidoscope of memories swirling around him. Images flashed, fragments of laughter, whispers, and chilling screams. Each visualization struck him like sharp daggers, cutting through the fabric of his consciousness. "Face it, Paul." The voice was everywhere and nowhere. It echoed off the walls. "This is your past. You can't turn back now." He felt his heart race as images intensified. There, a younger version of himself crouched in a dark corner of a room, his heart pounding as shadows crept closer. Fear sliced through every muscle in his body. Why had he picked that moment? Why was this memory surfacing now? "Remember?" The voice pressed on, laced with cruel delight. "You thought no one could save you. You were so sure of your powerlessness." Paul clutched his head, the overwhelming sensation of dread pressing down on him like a vice. "Stop. Just stop," he shouted, panic igniting in his chest. The familiar eyes peered through the shifting haze, their gaze now icy. "Where do you think you're going, Paul?" The eyes shimmered, rotating like dark stars in a stormy sky. "The truth isn't going anywhere. You must confront your own reflection. Or will you forever be shackled by your fears?" He had heard this before, felt it grinding against every yearning in his soul. The desire to break free, to scream against the confinement. But each time he tried, the weight of the past pulled him back down. "Push through." The voice roared. "The power to change your fate lies within you, buried beneath guilt and sorrow. Embrace it." He summoned all his courage and took a step forward into the brilliance, a scream of defiance breaking through clenched teeth. Paul shouted for truth, for understanding, for finally breaking the cycle that had suffocated him for so long. The light surged, momentarily blinding him, but amidst that glare, a figure began to crystallize. It stepped forward, his mother, young and radiant, with a familiar warmth scenting the air around her. Her eyes, once kind and gentle, were now filled with sorrow and regret. "Paul," her voice pierced through, cracking the illusion around him. "You shouldn't be here. I tried to keep you safe." "Safe?" His voice trembled, disbelief swirling through him. "You kept me in chains." Memories of anger boiled over, feelings of betrayal igniting flames of rage deep inside him. The warmth of her presence became frigid as he replayed the moments of abandonment and fear, moments that shaped his world and made him feel like a prisoner. "I thought I was protecting you," she insisted, her voice trembling like a leaf caught in a tempest. "I was drowning too, I just wanted to keep you from drowning." The weight of her words struck him, crashing over him like a tidal wave. Was this the truth he had been running from? A desperate attempt to protect him that resulted in chains binding them both? Finally, as he considered her story, pity crept into his heart. But guilt mixed with clarity came swiftly. "You were my mother," he said quietly. "You were supposed to save me." Her face twisted in anguish as the light began to dim. "And now the choice is yours, Paul. Break free of the past. Or let it shackle you forever. The shadows around him began to pulsate, clawing at his mind, demanding his attention. The weight of their whispers threatened to drown him again. The choice hung before him like a knife's edge. Could he bear this truth? Could he allow himself to feel the pain within those moments of his history? His heart raced like a freight train ready to derail. As the last glimmers of light faded, and the shadows ramped up their assault, Paul knew he stood at a crossroads. What path would he choose? Will you rise, or will you fall? The voice shattered through the air, now a cacophony of fear and temptation, echoing from every side. A sickening feeling twisted in his gut. The door behind him felt tightly closed, yet the threshold ahead glimmered with truth and terror. He had to choose. But could he bear the consequences of that choice? Are you ready to face what is coming? The entity whispered, the shades closing in like a tightening noose, and as the darkness approached, awaiting his decision, Paul realized, he had only moments left to decide his fate. What awaited him on the other side of this revelation? The darkness pulsed around Paul, echoing with the weight of his fears and regrets. He was tired of running, tired of hiding from the truth that had haunted him for far too long. The memories hovering just beyond the threshold felt like lead weights, but they also shimmered with the possibility of release. Will you rise, or will you fall? The voice echoed again, rippling through the shadows, wrapping around him like a vice. Behind him loomed all he had tried to escape. Ahead, a flickering light revealed the unknown. Enough! Paul shouted, voice cracking with urgency. I can't live in chains any longer. With a surge of determination, he stepped forward, pushing against the pressing shadows that clawed at his resolve. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the air hummed with energy, the memories flooding back with a vengeance. The walls around him shivered, peeling away like old paint, revealing a stunning tapestry of his hidden past. Childhood laughter mixed with sorrow played like notes in a symphony, delicate yet sharp. Moments unfurled like petals on a flower, each revealing deeper roots tangled in pain and loss. Paul stood stilled, breath held tight in his chest. Before him, he saw his younger self, crouched in the corner of that familiar room, a flicker of fear casting shadows across innocence. Help me, the child whimpered, voice echoing with desperation that cut through him like icy daggers. Who do I need to save? Paul whispered back, bewilderment hitting him like waves crashing on the shore. You or me? The boy's eyes reflected a world of hurt. You. We have to remember so we can let go. That plea took root, and without thinking, Paul took a step closer, grounding himself in the past that had haunted his every choice. Time stretched and twisted, memories crashing into one another like tides. He witnessed moments of joy and safety, clashing with memories of disappointment and betrayal. The laughter twisted into cries, joy fading into resentment. And in that cacophony, he felt the embrace of chains he had woven himself, linked by sorrow and guilt. He gasped, heart racing as clarity washed over him, brighter than any luminescent glow. I wasn't just a slave to fear, I was a slave to my memories. The child nodded, tears glistening. You took the blame for everything, you've carried it for so long. You're so much stronger now. Suddenly, the air grew thick as a shadow passed through, morphing into a figure clutched in despair, his mother. The echoes of their confrontation stood frozen in time, lingering with anguish. Her eyes matched his younger self's, filled with pain and longing to fix what had been shattered. Paul, she breathed, her voice trembling, I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting you. You pushed me into darkness. He yelled, the weight of truth bursting forth. How could you abandon me? I didn't mean to, she whispered, the truth like glass cutting through layers of denial. I was drowning too. I couldn't save us both. Her gaze was remorseful, filled with heartache. In that moment, Paul could feel the weight of love entangled with fear, guilt intertwining with compassion. And within that anguish lay the key to breaking free. I forgive you, Paul said, voice steady even in the storm of emotions. But I can't forgive myself if I don't learn to forgive me first. The darkness around them trembled, shadows swirling in a chaotic dance, the energy shifting as his resolve poured into the moment. Inhale what had he locked away. Exhale the truths that could shatter him. Time slipped like sand through his fingers as he immersed himself in the memories. The laughter bound him to innocence, the pain wrapped tighter with every regret. Confronting guilt transformed into whispers of strength, teaching him the art of release. That's right, the child whispered softly, a guiding light. Let it go. We've always been so much more. And with that final push, Paul reached into the depths of his spirit and seized the heart of his pain, the bearer of his past, shattered and yet beautifully intricate. I am not just a victim anymore, he declared, conviction radiating like the sun breaking through storm clouds. I am free. The shadows recoiled, darkness screaming as light overwhelmed them, dissolving barriers and crushing the chains that had held him tight. Freedom surged through him, and in that brilliance of acceptance, Paul felt his spirit lift, unbound and soaring. Paul turned to his mother and the child, a warm smile breaking through the storm of fears. Thank you for helping me find the way. As they faded into light, they carried with them all the memories that had burdened him. But now, instead of a weight, they became a tapestry of everything he had learned and a map toward healing. The space around him flickered, shadows retreating, revealing a new dawn. He stood stronger and whole, finally at peace with the choices he had made and the memories held dear, and Paul knew he would rise, no longer a slave, but a man fully alive, ready to embrace the future, one step at a time. The light enveloped him completely, illuminating a path of hope and possibility. Paul stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss these exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help others discover this journey. Flood the comment section with your reactions and theories. Let us hear your thoughts about the ending, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans know the power of supporting the channel through these actions.